Hey YouTube, Carl here. Today I'm going to walk you through the build process for the Ben Harber PT-17 Stearman, this beautiful model right here. Now I got really lucky that Ben shared an early version of these plans with me a few years back, and I built a scaled up version that quickly became my favorite plane ever. Unfortunately, the plans weren't available to the wider public until now, but now that they're out there, let's walk through the process and get one built.
Alright, for this build, I'm going to start with the wings. Now, if you've ever built a flight test plan, this is going to be very familiar to you. Thanks to Dan Sponholz for creating the plans, everything is exactly how you would find them with the flight test plans. All of your markings are going to be the same, so if you know how to build from those plans, you're going to know how to build from these. So let's get started. Alright, so I got the parts for the top wing laid out here. I've already cut out the little recesses for the spars and the struts that'll go in here later. Couple things to notice: I've got to go through and cut out my bevel. I've got to go through and remove this section of paper, make a little score here so I can fold the wingtips up. And this little section here in the back, I've got to hog the foam out of those two channels so that this little piece can fold back up. I'm missing the one on this side. I'm going to fix that. It's somewhere in the pile of parts, but we'll make do. Have these parts basically prepped. I'm going to do a quick dry fit with the spars just to see how things line up, see if I need to open these holes up at all. One of the nice things about the top wing that makes it the easiest place to start is that the top wing has no dihedral. So really I'm just going to assemble two flat sections of wing and glue them together and be done with the top wing. Really simple. I need to open this up just a touch. All right. Pre-bend these a little bit. That looks good. Let's go ahead and glue them down.
So before I go and actually glue anything, I'm going to do a little pre-rolling here just to pre-shape my top wing. Because we've removed that paper, it should make a nice smooth transition. Hopefully you want to try to avoid ending up with the being able to see the sharp lines where the spars are. Keep it nice and smooth. And you should end up with a little bit of an overhang in the back, about like so. Alright, so just like the flight test wings, I'm going to go through, put a bead of glue on both of these spars, fold it over, hold it down until it cures. Then I'm going to come back and run a bead of glue along the trailing edge here, and then we can fold our little piece here and close it up. Finally, we can finish up with the wingtip, and then we'll be ready to do the same thing on the other wing. Trailing edge, next. Get that bead of glue up in there. Now that that's cured, we're going to go ahead and get up in here underneath the wingtip. I need to be neater with my glue on the next one here. Need to scrape that off.
There's one wing, that's our left upper panel. We're going to go ahead and repeat the process on the right. All right, so that looks pretty good. If you think you're going to be going absolutely nuts with this plane, or if you build it much larger and it's going to be heavier, you could easily put a little joiner section here in the center to kind of span this gap and give your wing a little bit more rigidity. This size model, it doesn't need it. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the old Flite Test method, some tape, some hot glue, put these two wing halves together.
Looks good. Piece of scrap here to get the excess, and there we go.
All right, one wing down, one to go. All right, so for the lower wing, it's basically the same construction with a few obvious differences. On this one, we've got some ailerons, we've got some doublers for where the servos will get installed, and there is dihedral on this wing, so we have the dihedral gauge. On this build that I'm doing today, I am not going to be installing electronics. It would not be too hard to come back and install them after the fact. It's super easy to install them when you're doing the install, but I'm not going to take the time to do that today. So there's plenty of Flite Test videos to show you how to actually do the electronics installation. Don't need to see that here. So let's get started on these. I'm going to go ahead and pre-cut the bevels and remove the paper where it needs to be removed, and then we'll come back and get started. Parts cut, everything's laid out and ready to go. I'm going to do a test fit of the spars just like I did on the upper section. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to glue in these little doublers that go around here. The spars, if you glue them in before you put these in, you may have a little bit of trouble. You may need to trim these a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and install these first. I did punch some little holes so I can find exactly where the corners are. Obviously you want it to line up so you got little lips for your servo there. Again, just like the Flite Test plan.
All right, test fit of the spars. Looks good. Let's go ahead and get a bead of glue in and glue those down.
All right, so just like the top wing, got to go ahead and put a nice little pre-bend in here. Gently pre-bend the airfoil into the wing. Now the trailing edge of the top wing has this little over section, whatever you want to call it here. What I'm going to do, I'm actually not going to fold this up yet. The way that I've done my previous builds, I'm going to do that last. I'm going to just go ahead and do the initial fold the same way I have, and then I'm going to fold that and tuck that piece under after the fact.
Gentle pre-bend here. All right, now I got to do this trailing section here. I'm going to basically put a bead of glue in this paper section here, one along the top section, fold it over, and then quickly with my scrap, wipe off any excess glue that gets on the undersurface of the wing here.
finally, glue in this outboard section. And we really don't want the top surface to come down to the lower surface. We really want that lower surface to go up to the top surface. So make sure you've got it good and pre-bent there. Probably should put a little bit more pre-bend in. All right, so there is one wing. Let me get the other half done and we'll go ahead and set that dihedral. The last part of building the lower wing is to get the dihedral right. There is a gauge included. You're going to want to use it. Make sure that if you're going to have any error though, make sure you have a little bit extra dihedral rather than not enough. The reason is when you get further on into the build and you're trying to install the cabanes and the inner wing struts, if you don't have enough dihedral, nothing is going to line up. If you have a little bit too much, it's a little bit easier to relieve that and make it force everything to fit. But if you don't have enough, pieces aren't going to reach. So you'll see further on in the build what I mean by that. But yeah, let's go ahead and set the dihedral here, just like we would with any other flight test plan. All right, that looks pretty good. So now we've got a pair of wings. Just got to build the rest of her. So let's keep going. All right, time to start on the fuselage. Now, I've already said I'm not installing electronics in this thing, so I am going to assemble the motor pod, but I'm not going to put the firewall. I'm not going to deal with any of the speed controller. I'm not going to put a motor, any of that stuff. It's real easy to do. You guys can look at the flight test videos and see exactly how all that's done. I am just going to start with the actual structure for the forward section of the fuselage. I have the nose battery bay, the battery bay doublers, the landing gear doublers, the battery bay top, and I do have the motor pod pieces laid out here. We'll start with those. Obviously, I want to go ahead and cut my channels in here, get all the pieces ready to assemble, and then we'll come back and put those together. Construction of the forward fuselage, I'm going to start with this A-fold on the center battery bay, tray section. Then I'm going to glue on these doublers on the outside, and finally I'm going to come back and I'm going to install the landing gear after gluing the landing gear into its plate. Then we're going to go and get this installed into the fuselage and keep building our way backward. I did forget to mention this one piece is basically what your firewall would be. It's going to go all the way in the front. This is also what you're going to be able to wrap your Ben Harber foam board motor around to hide the engine. Ben Harber foam board engine to hide your motor. Very important. You have this section of the forward fuselage, the battery box, and where your power pod would slide in here. We've got that built. Actually, I'm holding it upside down. This is the top. That's where the landing gear goes. This is the forward fuselage lower section. You can see this is where the landing gear is actually going to get installed. It actually installs between these two pieces. So what I'm going to do next, there's also this former N1 that's going to install right back here. So I'm going to prep these two pieces and then get this forward section of the fuselage installed together right here. So just a quick dry fit here. I am going to go ahead and install my landing gear into the little plates here. You'll notice there are 2 holes in the lower side of the battery tray, 3 holes in the lower side of the fuselage skin, with 1 toward the front and 2 toward the rear. So you just want to make sure that when you're installing everything, this is how everything wants to line up. Let me go ahead and get this glued into this tray. Landing gear plate doesn't look too bad. May have overdone the gauge of the wire, but I think that'll be okay. Quick test fit here. I may have made the cardinal sin of installing that. And I did. This one's not going to pass through. Okay, so I've made my first mistake. Should have installed the landing gear through here and then clamped it in there. That's going to be just fine. We're just going to cut a recess so I can slide it in, and then we'll glue everything back together. It's going to be just fine. I'm going to make mistakes like this. I'm not a pro. I don't build with foam board or this kind of foam board very often, so sue me. But here we go. Let's get her done. Dry fit. Beautiful. Okay. So former N1 is going to go around your battery box back here, and it's also going to tie into your lower fuselage skin. Cut a relief here. Hate to do it, don't have a choice. That's what I get for making a mistake with my installation. That all looks good. We'll glue that back together real quick, and then we'll go ahead and wrap everything around there and tie it into this. All right, quick dry fit. That looks pretty good. So right now I'm going to secure former N1 to the lower fuselage and the landing gear up into here. I'm not going to try to wrap everything around just yet. I'm only going to secure the flat portions and make sure that everything is properly aligned and nicely set and cured before I move on. I'm just going to add a little bit of extra glue for a little more strength on the landing gear connection. On other models, I would probably put a little ply plate or something to help distribute that load, but these are really quite light foam board models, so it's not entirely necessary. All right, and we'll just go ahead and give it a little pre-bend here. And it's looking good. It's lining up really nicely. So now I'll go ahead and apply some glue to these sections right here where the skin touches the former, and we'll go ahead and get that portion glued down. So next I am going to take the forward fuselage section, which is right here. I'm going to go ahead and pre-score these, and we're going to wrap this section here next. Okay, now former C1 is going to go right back here in front of the pilot seat. So if you're looking at this as your student seat and your pilot seat, this is going to line up and wrap just like this. So I'm not actually going to install C1 yet. I am going to go ahead and pull the rest of this paper off, or my template paper off, and then get this installed around here, and then we'll install former C1. Now what I want to do is get this lined up just right, and then tape it down over here. Once that's done, we'll trim the excess with a razor. And then we'll get a quick bead of glue in here to secure it. All right, now that we've got the landing gear on, we can go ahead and wrap up the forward fuselage section. There's two skins. The lower skin will go on first, and the upper skin, which has all of the paper removed, will go on second. Carefully align this just right. All right, and the last thing to do with this forward cockpit section before we start working on the aft is to glue in this cockpit bulkhead between the front and rear cockpit. All right, at this point, we're gonna go ahead and start working on the aft fuselage. That's made up of a couple of pieces we got here. We have the upper turtle deck for the rear. All this paper is gonna be removed, and this is gonna be smoothed and rounded over. And this is your lower section. And you'll note in the aft section here, there's an area where the paper and foam is removed. In these sections here, you're going to leave all of the paper, and there are sections here where the paper will be removed to help round a little bit more, and this is essentially going to be folded over and this glued to these sections here once we install our tail surfaces. So we'll go ahead and get started on that. I'm going to go ahead and pre-bend these a little bit. So one little suggestion when you're gluing up your rear fuselage section, when you go to install your formers, if you install them flat on the table, glue them in like this, and then go to wrap, your formers are going to end up at a funny angle to the actual fuselage line. You want this to be your datum line. You want these essentially to be at 90 degrees to that top line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them set to the appropriate angle here, and I'm just going to use a marker, put a little line in here where where I want the glue to be, and then when I go back to glue them in, I'll make sure that I have these at the appropriate angle. So for your tail wheel, you got a bunch of options. On this previous build, I just did a skid with a barbecue skewer. That works perfectly well. For this one, I may actually do a bent wire going into the rudder for a steerable tail wheel, but you've got plenty of rudder authority. The little skid like this works just fine, and that tail comes up real quick. So you really don't need a steerable tail wheel on this model. So I'm not going to do it on this build, but it would be really simple to go ahead and cut a little tail wheel wire, embed it into the tail, and glue it in right here. Wrap this little piece of paper around it, and you'd be good to go with that. I'll probably just do the skid for this one, just like I did on the last one. Again, that's really all you need. Now, I am going to go ahead and do the installation for the rudder and elevator next. This part is pretty much exactly like any Flite Test build. We'll go ahead and do a dry fit here, see how everything is looking. So I will go ahead and glue my rudder onto my horizontal stabilizer before installing it into the aircraft, making sure everything is good and true. Now it's really not needed on a model of this size, but if you wanted to, you could certainly add some cross bracing for your vertical stabilizer there. I probably will do it on larger versions of this model, but again, for the smaller model, you really don't need it. We'll do a quick dry fit into the model, into the tail section here. Just see how things are looking. Very nice. Just like that. Alright, so at this point, if I was installing all the electronics, I would install the push rods, the control horns, have everything hooked up. The servo tray is actually going to end up being installed right in this section here, but it'd be much easier to go ahead and route all that stuff before you add that top turtle deck. Alright, next I'm going to secure the aft turtle deck. Make sure you've got this really well formed and rolled before you go to install it. It does slot around the tail here, and it's going to go all the way up to this front former. I am still going to put a piece of tape along one side and help glue that side down, then put a bead of glue on the other side and roll it over, and then I'll come back and clean up the tail section here. Get a little glue underneath the tail in the back here. And then a quick bead of glue along this side and close her up. Alright, so now we're ready to join the two fuselage halves. To do that, I'm also going to need my servo tray. This is going to actually fit in here in the front of the aft section and secure it to the aft of the front section. So let's do this now. So that servo tray is going to install just like that. And then it'll give you lots of surface over here to glue into the front forward fuselage section. And again, this would be a good time to install those servos, run everything through. It's going to give you the best access you're going to get. All right, we're ready to go ahead and join the forward and aft fuselage sections. You'll note, do a couple of dry fits before you actually put any glue to it. You want to make sure that this top section here lines up right with the top section of the aft cockpit, and everything else should line up just fine if that lines up. I'm going to start by just securing one side, and then I'm going to come back and get the other. And I do want to get some glue on this little tab right here as well.
The last two things to do for the fuselage, aside from putting the wheels and the electronics and all that good stuff in it, is the windshields and the fairings for the landing gear. So you can obviously cut these out of clear plastic or make your own, but the foam board ones are included are just fine. You will want to go ahead and kind of bevel the bottom edge so that it'll sit a little bit cleaner to the fuselage once you install it. And for reference, the wider section of the center will be to the top, will be up. Should line up really well with the front seam on the cockpit here, or on the fuselage, just like so. And we'll go ahead and get those glued in. The fairings. The fairings will just wrap right around the landing gear wire. The slanted side will face backward on the fuselage. Alright, let's get those wings on there now.
Alright, so the last thing we've got to do before we can put the wings on this bird is get the cabanes and the inner wing struts finished up. Now, these are made from Dollar Tree foam board, but they are reinforced with barbecue skewers, and there's a little extra paper that's going to wrap around the barbecue skewer. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all put together, and then we'll be ready to install the wings. Wing installation is going to start with the lower wing, obviously the one with your ailerons in it. So what we're going to do is just a quick dry fit.
Making sure everything is properly aligned. Eyeball it. And that does not look bad at all. Does not look bad at all. And with the test fit in there, I'm just going to do a quick measurement, making sure that I am equal distance from both wingtips to the tail. Yes. That looks quite good. I am seeing this as 4 1/4, so 4 1/4 inches from the fuselage to the aileron, and 20 inches from the end of the wing to the hinge line on the elevator. I'll measure it this direction. This will be a little easier. Almost. That's real close. Let's see this side again. Yeah. There we go. That does not look bad. The final thing to check, how does that look in comparison to our elevator and our vertical? And everything looks pretty square. Might need to push this side up just a hair. That does not look bad for a foam board plane. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to make a quick mark on the inside of the fuselage here. Let's see. Here and here. Pair of lines here to help me align everything once I am ready to do the installation. And let's go ahead and get this one glued on. Checking my alignment marks on the inside here. And you gotta work quick to make sure everything is square and aligned. Double check, 20 inches. 20 inches. Looks good. Eyeball checks. All look pretty good. Excellent. Put another little bead of glue here along the edge. So the last thing to do for the lower wing is this little belly pan here. This is going to install in the gap in the back of the fuselage and come from the forward fuselage all the way to the aft fuselage and fill in this little gap here along the trailing edge and make it all nice and clean. It looks fantastic with this install. With that on the belly there, we can fold these up. May need to trim them just a touch, but fold those up and install them. So now to get this top wing installed, we got to use the cabanes and the interplane struts. Now I'm going to do a dry fit, make sure everything is fitting in the slots, and then I'll go back and add the glue and use my gauges to make sure that everything is at the appropriate angles. One thing you want to be aware of is the flat section of the cabanes will go forward. It'll be facing the front of the aircraft, and then your interplane struts, there's a little section that is that has a connecting section here that will be up. It'll be and that'll be facing the front of the aircraft.
So let's go ahead and start opening these up and do a test fit. Okay. Right. Not bad. That's not bad at all. So what we're going to do is pull the top wing off and then use these gauges to install the cabanes and interplane struts to the top wing. Then we'll come back and install them to the fuselage and the lower wing. And the way you do this, and be cautious of the position of these, but we will go ahead and, let's see, start with this, get this in here, and this is going to go at this angle right here. This is the angle that I want to set these at. I like the looks of that, so I will go ahead and put some glue on this. Install it here, and then use my gauge and tip it over like so, and hold it there until it is set. All right, same thing on the other side. A quick test fit. Looks pretty good. And obviously we can make some adjustments once we're installing it on the aircraft, but we want it as close as possible. All right. Doesn't look half bad. All right, let's finish this up. Do a quick dry fit. It's going together quite nicely. And a quick eyeball. That does not look bad at all. I like that. All right, let's go ahead and get it glued on. Right. Now,
All right, so that is how you build the Ben Harber PT-17 Stearman. Now, I didn't put all the bells and whistles on this one, didn't even bother putting wheels on it, but from this one you can see what she looks like with the wheels and with the Continental 7-cylinder radial dummy that Ben includes with the plans. It's real easy to put together and it looks the part. I will be releasing a set of 3D print files for a Pratt & Whitney R985 9-cylinder radial if you want to bolt one of those onto the front of your Stearman for reasons. And big thanks to Ben for a gorgeous model. I know from experience that it flies as good as it looks. And a big thanks to Dan Sponholz for taking the plans and making them perfect. These built exactly per the plans. It's a really easy build. If you've ever built flight test planes before, this is not a daunting build at all. So until next time, thanks for watching.